What is going on, YouTube people? Northeast Ohio here. It has been so long since I looked at a chart and graph, I almost forgot what they look like. We're going to dive in and talk a little football today. The NFL is back tonight. It is the Hall of Fame game. It's taking place actually not that far from me in the grand scheme of things, but I typically always avoid it. I've lived in that neck of the woods for a while now, and yeah, it's a parking nightmare. The starters play for about a series. Not exactly the best football in the world, but this is officially the last week we have without football until February. So, what I wanted to do today was just kind of pop on and look at a bunch of the key quarterbacks and see how prices have been going for the last 30 days or so, because we're a month out from the season. So, I kind of wanted to, put this as like a line in the sand before the season, before the preseason starts, and kind of see where things go over the next 30 days. We've talked about the National a bunch, and the big takeaway from the National is quarterbacks were hot, specifically the 18 class, but in general, the younger generation quarterbacks from the last 4 to 5 years were the names that you heard getting asked about a lot. In addition to the 2018 class, there was a lot of people asking for Kyler. There was a ton of Mahomes on the floor. And personally, I had some Dak stuff with me. I got asked a lot of questions about Dak, like at trade nights and stuff. If I had Dak Prescott stuff on the table, someone would almost always ask about it. And I just had an optic base and a silver PSA 9 prism, which I actually ended up selling at one of the trade nights. So people definitely seem to be asking about Dak a lot. Small sample size. It's a big show. We're all seeing different stuff, but yeah, going to talk a little football today. Going to dive into market movers. Link in the description down below. 20% off code NEO, all that jazz. So let's go ahead and dive in. Smash the like button, subscribe, all that stuff. Let's start with 2020. The 2020 class doesn't get a ton of buzz, and I ran everything back 30 days with the exception of one, and I'll talk about it because I think I've been sleeping on one particular card slash set from a particular year uh, that always seems to do really well, and I just kind of forget about it. So 2020 class, Hurts, Burrow, Herbert, and Tua. I did not hear a lot of. I don't want to say I didn't hear a lot of buzz. I heard more buzz about the other QB classes than 2020. I don't know if it's just because 2020 class, we've been talking about Herbert endlessly for a year now. It seems like, and some of the other guys got kind of forgotten about a little bit. So I was curious. And this is just base Prism PSA 10. We're not doing anything super crazy here. Prism football pop counts tend to be a lot lower, especially with 2020 Prism because of the PSA nonsense. But Burrow has basically stayed flat. Tua up 22%, Hurts up 30%, and Herbert up 15%. Now Herbert's the sexy name. I think this is a case of Tua and Hurts are getting the bigger bump because their price points are a lot lower. And I think there's probably a little fear around Burrow to see how the knee actually does now that we're close to the season. He has been practicing, but I think people kind of want to see him do something before they put some faith in there coming off the ACL injury. But I do think this is strictly a case of Herbert has a lot baked into him where Tua and Hurts don't. So they're getting a little bit of a run in prices the last 30 days or so. I'm actually surprised Herbert wasn't up more, but 630 bucks when you look at his PSA 10 price compared to some of the other guys we're going to be talking about, to me seems a little high. I've said this in multiple videos. It really feels like um, Herbert just has a lot of stuff baked into him already, and I just don't know how good the Chargers are going to be this year. I feel like there's a real chance he could have a major pullback once the season starts. I think he has the chance to fall a decent amount, more so than any of the other guys. The other guy from the 2020 class, Jacob Eason. I just included this because this is, the hot thing. And this was a fun day at the National when Carson Wentz injury happened. And all of a sudden, Jacob Eason was in no cases and then was in everybody's case in seemingly 30 minutes. His base Prism is up 178%. Pretty much across the board, honestly, I would just be selling Eason. If you had him and you got in cheap if you got him, I would just sell it. You're going to make a nice return. Why even risk carrying it into season where, maybe Wentz comes back, he loses the job, he doesn't play well. Who knows? There's just so many things that could go wrong there, or at least sell off, in my opinion. I have no Eason, so I'm just looking at this from what I normally do. These prices spike, at least sell a majority of it off, lock in your profits, set one or two cards to the side that maybe you really like, or maybe you're low pop or whatever. But this common base stuff, just move it. Don't overthink this situation. Don't get cute. Just take the money, set a couple aside if you got multiples, move on to the next thing. If you try to time the market, just, well, I'm going to wait till week 1 and he's going to play really well and then I'll cash out. That might not happen. Or he could get hurt between now and the season start. Who knows? A lot of things could happen. You made your profit. This is as good as it could have got. Just sell it. Move on to the next thing. I think sometimes, myself included, we overthink these situations and hold cards for too long. And I'm guilty of it, even though, I try not to. We become attached to this stuff and we always think it could go higher. Let's talk about the 2018 class. This was definitely, from the national perspective, the 3 names that I heard the most when it came to football. Specifically, Allen was number 1, and then Baker and Lamar were getting a ton of love as well in regards to what people were asking for, like at trade nights. Feedback I was getting from dealers that I know. I knew a handful of dealers that were set up at the National, and then just general, what you kind of just pick up walking around. So last 30 days, Allen being the hottest name at the National is reflected over the charts and graphs the last 30 days, up 20%. Lamar only up 5, Baker up 9. So little movement on those two, but Allen definitely getting a lot of buzz. He's going to have to play well to maintain this price, I think. That's my biggest knock on Allen. There is a lot baked into his numbers. He is really good. Do not get me wrong. He just wrecked me in fantasy football last year, multiple occasions. And obviously the Bills team is loaded. And he's played extremely, extremely well last year, and his stuff got monster run-ups. That being said, can he repeat it? In theory, he should be able to, but he's going to need to play very well to justify those prices. That's part of the reason why I like a lot of the other guys, because it's cheaper entry points. And as I talked before, the other reason I want to watch these players, whether it's these 3 or any of these guys, leading up to the season, because anyone that doesn't get a major bump the next 30 days or so are guys that I'm going to be very interested in potentially buying early on. I know I don't like to normally carry football in the season, but if they haven't seen huge price spikes leading up to the season, and the season starts, and I can get in their stuff reasonable, and I believe in the player, I might look to make some moves, because I think it's more likely that their stuff spikes with good performance. Guys like Allen, there's a lot baked in already. He has to play extremely well to hold those prices. If they falter at all, or he just plays pretty good, I think his stuff will come down. We see it all the time in the other sports. We saw it last year in football. I mean, look at baseball this past year. Tatis, Acuna, all those guys. They played really, really good, and their prices came down after the initial little buzz. Look at Ohtani. Ohtani stuff spiked. He played well. It spiked. He's still playing well, and he's seeing a pretty good pullback on his prices right now. And same thing happened in the preseason. And you see the same thing in the NBA. Zion, Luka all got big run-ups in the preseason NBA. The season started. They played fine, but they didn't live up to expectations, and prices pulled back. So I'm very curious to see what the next 30 days looks like for football, and to see what players slip through the cracks that maybe you can make a short-term play on. Maybe like a star stock thing or something like that, where you just get in and get out quick, if you believe in the player. This is the one that I mentioned earlier that sneaks up on me all the time, and it always sells well. I don't know if this is just a football thing or what. Paper Donruss, specifically 2018 Paper Donruss. Looks very similar to Optic, but in Optic, the players have their helmets on. Obviously, a paper card instead of the chromium card. These things always sell really well. They're one of the leaders. Like, if you look at like most cards sold for a particular player in a given time, they're almost always number 1. And they are low risk investments. You can get into these things pretty cheap and then flip them quite a bit. I ran these charts back 180 days. Look at the growth on these cards the last 180 days. Baker, $94 up to 150, a 62% increase. Lamar, $133 up to 170, a 25% increase. Allen's a little more expensive at 282 up to 345 for a 20% increase. But load points of entry, and you can make a decent little amount on those, and these still have room to keep going depending on where you and once again, depending on where you bought in. There were some additional lows here. If you go back to let's call it like mid-June. Let me run this from mid-June, like about June 10th, June 11th was kind of the low point of the football market. If you bought in at the lows, 30%, 30%, 65% on Allen, these got down to $210 for a hot minute. I guess what I'm trying to say, for like a low cost play, like just don't ignore these base paper. Once again, I think we kind of missed the window on these, but normally it's a product I wouldn't look at. But I think if you're just looking to play at the lower end market, I don't think these are a bad move. And I didn't have time to look to see if it translates to 2019 and the 2020 class. 2020 class might be tricky because of the PSA shenanigans, but the older stuff, it's just interesting. I know Mahomes stuff sells well and just paper non-rust. So interesting angle there. I just always noticed that those always seem to do really well. Kyler Murray, last 30 days. The 2019 quarterback class is pretty weak, so I just pulled Kyler. And I pulled his Prism, his Optic, and his Select Concourse base just to get a little bit more info in. Basically, it stayed flat. 2% on Prism base, 0% on Optic, 18% on Concourse. I will tell you right now, if his stuff stays flat, I am interested. He played really well last year and then hurt his shoulder and then was pretty much meh the rest of the season. Had some moments, but had more bad moments than good moments, and that team kind of fell apart. But he was really electric for the first 3 to 4 or 5 games, maybe 6 games. And that team got better, and he's fully healthy. There was reports actually right before I recorded this video, the old Twitter beat writer reports about Kyler just basically shredding on the practice field, just tearing people up. And I'll take that for what it's worth. But I feel like there's this like nice little post-hype bump that you could get on these guys like 2 or 3 years after they've been done. Like Herbert gets all the hype and prices, it gets super high. He ends up missing expectations in year 2, or plays fine but just doesn't hit the lofty goals. The prices fall. Then I think there's an interesting buying opportunity there between year 2 and year 3. Kind of like Josh Allen last year. You could have said the same thing with Lamar, but he struggled a little bit last year. And same with Baker. Baker struggled in the first half of the season, but played really well in the second half of the season. But Kyler's definitely a name I'm keeping on my radar if his prices stay flat between now and the season starting. I am intrigued by that, and I may actually just glance at some Kyler stuff now if I could find some decent prices on stuff, maybe like some low end select, or even these optics. See what I can track down there. I'll have to do a little bit more digging on Kyler, but he is a name that intrigues me. We mentioned Dak. His stuff's doing pretty good. Base Prism's up 20%. Base Optics down 23%. I think someone just posted a card wrong here. I looked. This was a legitimate buy it now at 228. But everything before that was 300 plus. I know he has a little bit of a shoulder tweak, but there's auctions right now that are close to 300 for this. So I'm going to count this one as an outlier. We'll see what happens over the next couple sales. But I'm basically, let's just call this a $300 card. So it's basically flat or up slightly along with the Prism Silver. And like I said, his name was popular out of my case at the National. Mahomes has really stayed flat. His Optic, I pulled his Optic base PSA 10 and 9, Prism Silver PSA 10 and 9, just because of the high price points, just to get a little bit more action on his stuff and get a better feel. But over the last 30 days, 5%, 2%, down 4, up 12 on the 9. Now, I will say, a Silver Prism hasn't sold in a PSA 10 in almost a week, at least online. I'm sure a bunch sold at the National. Last price paid was $82.50 for an eBay comp. I checked. There's an auction with 3 days, 2 or 3 days left on it that's sitting at $8,300 already with a bunch of bids. So the next one that sells will have a little bit of an increased bump on it. We'll see if it gets all the way up. The last highest on this was 92.50 back in early in the month. I don't think this one will get that high, but you never know. I'll be very curious to see what that next Prism Silver ends at, just because one is not sold for a while, and it'll be the first one to go post national. And I didn't hear, people were definitely looking for Mahomes, but there was a ton of Mahomes on the show floor. I feel like saw Prism Silver Mahomes all day long and autos the whole 9 yards. But I just felt like I saw a lot of Prism and Optic Mahomes on the show floor at the National. And it very well could have been moving, but there was a lot of it. People were definitely had their Mahomes out for display. So that's all I got for you guys and girls. So, smash the like button, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff down below. Be very curious to see how the football market kind of plays out over the next 30 days. Stuff's going to happen. People are going to get hurt. Maybe some transactions happen. People are going to have good preseason. Will we see spikes from preseason games? As silly as that sounds, I think we will, especially for like the lower end, cheaper guys. If someone comes out and balls out, I think we're going to see prices move based off preseason games, especially like on something like Star Stock or something. So also something that'll be intriguing to keep an eye out for, because that could tell you a story for what things are going to move like once the season starts. But yeah, smash the like button, subscribe. Tomorrow's video will be national talk, probably my last big national video. I had Hannah on from She Collects Cards, very specifically because she plays in different markets than I do. She is big into F1. She's big into soccer. And she is also bigger on the higher end market than I am. She picked up a Jordan. She moved a Tom Brady Bowman Chrome. So she plays in an area that I don't typically play in. Those cards are out of my price range. So I don't follow that market as closely. So I don't hear the buzz as much about that stuff because I'm just not talking to those level of people where she is. So we had a very interesting conversation. We actually recorded it yesterday. So that'll be dropping tomorrow morning. Just some general national takeaways and then some F1 talk. But yeah, it was a great interview. Always great having Hannah on from She Collects Cards. So we will catch you tomorrow for that one. Not sure if I'll have anything on Saturday, and then normal weekly market video on Sunday, which I did not get a chance to do last week because of the Nationals. So like, comment, sub. Peace.